On Tuesday, fans around the world will react as the League Cup returns. The Carabao Cup, one of the tournaments of all time. And yeah, I get that there's not much excitement around the League Cup returning, and it's understandable. It's just not that interesting of a competition, especially when you compare it to its more successful brother, the FA Cup. The FA Cup has more history, much more teams enter it, the entire English pyramid as opposed to just the Football League, and there's just an air of unimportance around the League Cup. It's been dominated by the Big Six to the point that I forgot the winners qualify for Europe because the team that wins it is always already there. So I can understand why fans will just acknowledge that it happens but not really care. But it wasn't always like this. I want to talk about a really fun run that happened in the League Cup just over a decade ago. I'm going to be talking about Bradford City. Bradford City were in League 2 at the time, but they have a surprisingly strong history. They won the FA Cup in 1911 and were in the Premier League as recently as 2001. But after that 2001 season, they suffered a dramatic decline and were relegated to the 4th tier by 2007. By the start of 2012, they were in their 6th season as a 4th tier side. Bradford started their season in the EFL Cup against Notts County. County were in League 1 at the time and on paper favorites, but this was a Notts County team that were still reeling after actually just getting scammed by their owners. It's a story that requires its own video, but for now, all we need to know is that Bradford won 1-0 after a goal by James Hansen in extra time. Oh yeah, we should talk about the team. Bradford's manager at the time was Phil Parkinson, and if that name sounds familiar, he's the current manager of Wrexham. Now, I haven't watched that documentary at all, but I assume he features heavily, and they've probably brought up this cup run during the documentary. Their star man was Nahki Wells, a striker who's a Bermuda international. He's actually gone on to play in the Premier League and is still playing in the Championship today. For Bermuda, he was probably the top striker in CONCACAF for a period, which probably says more about CONCACAF than it does him, but still, that's a good achievement, and he's a really strong player, especially for League 2. His strike partner was the aforementioned James Hansen. While Wells had a ton of speed, Hansen was 6'4" and a very strong target man. This is something that's not very uncommon in the lower leagues, but if you're not used to playing against a player like him, he could cause a lot of trouble. Running through the rest of the team quickly, in goal there is Matt Duke, who's currently Sheffield United's goalkeeping coach, and he split time with John McLaughlin, who's currently at Rangers and made the Scotland national team last season. At right back there was Stephen Darby, a former Liverpool player who played in the Premier League and the Champions League, and his career was on the rise before he had to retire due to illness. And there was a good amount of high-level experience in the squad. Centre back Andrew Davies, midfielder Nathan Doyle, and winger Kyle Reid were all former England youth internationals who made their Premier League debut. Then centre back Rory McArdle was a Northern Ireland international, and left back James Meredith was an Aussie who actually made their World Cup squad in 2018 after being given his debut by Ange Postecoglou. I should note that this isn't particularly uncommon even amongst League 2 teams, and that Gary's, Jones, and Thompson were two of the squad's best players with much less flashy resumes. But having these players must have given Bradford some confidence when they were going up against top teams. Speaking of, their next game was against Watford, a championship team and a good one. This is the 12-13 season. You may remember Troy Deeney's amazing late winner against Leicester in the playoff semi-final. Wonder what happened after that. But for this game, Bradford got the benefit of Watford rotating their squad, but it was still a very tough match. Watford took the lead and things were looking bleak before Kyle Reid was able to score a late equalizer. Then in the 94th minute, with extra time looming, Gary Thompson came up with a late winner to send Bradford to the next round. Bradford must have felt lucky in the next round as they got Burton, the only other remaining League 2 team. But they didn't feel very lucky in the first 30 minutes as Burton took a 2-0 lead. But once again, Bradford were able to respond as Nahki Wells stepped up with 2 goals to send the game to extra time, where Stephen Darby scored a goal from 30 yards out to send them to the next round. And this was another late game winner after 2 other winners coming after the 90th minute. This was a crazy run, but it's easy to see this being seen as a lucky performance. And it seemed like their luck ran out, as in the next round they drew Wigan. That might not seem so bad today, but this is the year that Wigan won the FA Cup. Not only are Bradford facing a Premier League team, they're facing a Premier League team that takes cup competition seriously. So, Parkinson did the only sane thing you can do in this situation. Bunker down, cross your fingers, and hope you can survive the 120 minutes. Force Roberto Martinez's team to break you down. Needless to say, it went to penalties. Bradford were perfect from the spot, and Duke was able to pull off a save on Jordi Gomez, a former Barcelona player, to send Bradford to the quarterfinals, where they drew Arsenal. Arsenal were still managed by Arsene Wenger and a Champions League team every season. Chelsea was the only opposition they could have drawn that would have been harder. But this was an Arsenal team going through a bit of a transition. They just lost Robin van Persie, they just lost Cesc Fabregas, they hadn't bought Ozil or Alexis yet. Santi Cazorla was probably the only top player in this team, and we're all starting to realize that Jack Wilshere, Aaron Ramsey, Theo Walcott, Oxlade-Chamberlain, they weren't going to take Arsenal to the next level. It's kind of weird to look back at the squad because the team really isn't that strong, but they still managed to finish fourth, finishing above Gareth Bale's Tottenham, and only lost to Bayern Munich on away goals as they won the Champions League and curb-stomped Barcelona 7-0. Arsenal obviously dominated the match early, having the majority possession. But then things got weird. Bradford got a set piece and they were able to find a goal. This might seem like a bit of a fluke, but this was a big Bradford team, and Arsenal were not built to deal with it. So then Bradford did what they did against Wigan. Defend for their lives. And they made it pretty far too. But late in the game, Cazorla was able to find Vermaelen on the back post. Jeez, you had Cazorla and Vermaelen and Wilshere all fit and all playing in the same game. This might have been the only time that ever happened. And Vermaelen was able to score the equalizer, sending the game to extra time. But Bradford didn't give up. They defended stoutly and were able to send the game to penalties once again. And while they were there, Duke was able to get a save on Cazorla, get a save on Shamak, and get his revenge on Vermaelen, sending Bradford to the semifinals. Bradford managed to avoid Chelsea in the draw once again as they got Aston Villa. Now this was a decent Aston Villa team. You had Christian Benteke at his best, but Aston Villa were in the midst of a relegation battle. And remember, the League Cup semi-final is over 2 legs. It will be tough to take the focus away from the Premier League for 2 games, and Bradford took advantage. 3 goals off of set pieces and some heroics from Matt Duke gave Bradford a 3-1 lead heading into the second leg. It was a dominant performance in the air by Bradford, but it also inspired Aston Villa, and they came to play for the second leg. They dominated the match early, and Christian Benteke was able to make it a 1-goal game. Then James Hansen was able to rise up and get Bradford a 4th set-piece goal, and they were able to hang on late in the game, win the tie 4-3 overall, and head to the League Cup final. This was a remarkable run. They knocked out 3 Premier League teams by showing a ton of heart in defending and taking advantage of their set pieces, the template to beat teams that are stronger than you. And then Bradford got a bit more luck. Chelsea, the reigning European champions, had been knocked out by Swansea. Everybody was behind Bradford now. The Dalai Lama gave them his blessing. That part would have been better last year, but still, everybody was behind them. They had all the momentum in the world, and everyone was hoping. Well, that happened. And on paper, this seems like the most winnable game out of the Premier League opposition that they faced, but Swansea were able to dominate. Now, it should be worth mentioning that this was the year that Swansea had Michu, and he was going off. This is the Michu that was an inspiration to Erling Haaland. And Swansea weren't far removed from the championship, and they had some players like Ashley Williams and Leon Britton who had played in League Two and traveled all the way up the leagues. They knew how to deal with a team like Bradford. And in addition, at some point, Bradford's luck was just going to run out. You couldn't get that many set pieces that many times consistently. So Bradford had to watch another team celebrate at Wembley. But the season wasn't over. The League Cup final is mid-season, and after the game, they had to go back to League Two. And Bradford, they were a good squad, but with their focus divided, they weren't playing great in the league. But now, they were able to rally, get back into the promotion race, and they've just managed to scrape in, finishing 7th, and getting into the playoff semi-final, where they faced Burton once again. Burton had extra motivation after Bradford had knocked them out of the League Cup, and got off to a 2-0 lead early in the first leg. Bradford were able to recover somewhat through goals from Wells and Thompson, but were still down 3-2 heading into the second leg. But there, Nahki Wells took over, scoring a brace and getting an assist, sending Bradford to the promotion final and sending them back to Wembley. They had a tough opposition facing them in the final, a Northampton squad led by the world's strongest player, Akinfenwa. But Bradford were not going to be knighted at Wembley once again, and they got off to a hot start, scoring 3 goals in the first 30 minutes, and were able to cruise to victory and earn promotion to League One. This Bradford squad is one of my favorite lower league teams ever. Such an amazing cup run, and then they got promoted in the playoff final. It's awesome, and it helps that there's some real talent in the squad like Nahki Wells. They're able to survive League One comfortably in the next season, and then start pushing for promotion. During the 2014-15 season, they actually went on another good cup run, knocking out Chelsea and Sunderland on the way to the FA Cup quarterfinals. Around this time, me and I have to believe several other people felt like Bradford would just continue to rise and eventually reach the Premier League. And they came close. In 2016, they made the playoff semi-final, and in 2017, they made the playoff final in League One, just missing out on promotion by losing to Millwall late in the game. But it wasn't to be. Bradford were actually relegated back to League Two in 2019, and they're still there today. It's a bit disappointing, but I don't think that takes away from how good Bradford's cup run was and how fun they made the League Cup that year. And hey, the League Cup could be fun again this season. It's starting back up again, and Bradford are still in it. So maybe care about it. It's a tournament that I have a weird affinity towards, and I'm hoping that it can be fun again. And yeah, that's all I have to talk about. Let me know if you like the more storytelling version of a video, and if you liked it, like, subscribe. With that, see ya.